I'm Paula Newton in Ottawa, and this is CNN.
Good morning to viewers here in the U.S. and around the world. It's Thursday, July 14th, and I'm Brianna Keeler with John Berman. This morning, new clues surrounding the pending January 6th witness who Donald Trump tried to contact. It's an allegation that has been referred to the Justice Department, not formally, but it's been sent up the chain there. First on CNN, sources say Trump tried to call a member of the White House support staff who was in talks with the January 6th committee. That is new. The exact identity still unknown at this point. The witness, though, did not pick up when Trump called. This was not someone that Trump would routinely communicate with. And this came after Cassidy Hutchinson's explosive testimony.
The alarmed witness contact an attorney. This is January 6th committee member Elaine Luria, the congresswoman, speaking to CNN.
We take very seriously the safety of any witnesses, anyone who comes forward to the committee, and likewise, their privacy. In this case, any speculation about who this person might have been and a lot of people trying to tie it together. The committee will just say that we want to protect this witness, but we also want to hold people accountable who have potentially broken the law.
All right, with us now, CNN senior crime and justice reporter Katelyn Polantz, CNN senior political analyst John Avlon, and CNN senior legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Elie Honig. Katelyn, I want to start with you. The new CNN reporting on this witness.
Right, John. Let's walk through this because what we're learning now is part of the reason why we're understanding that the committee is taking this so seriously, that it wasn't just a call that was placed that Liz Cheney spoke about at that previous hearing. So what we are learning now about this call from Donald Trump, and this is according to reporting from our colleagues Ryan Nobles, Dana Bash, Annie Grayer, and Zach Cohen, is that Donald Trump tried to call a White House support staff member. So that's a career employee in the White House, not a political appointee that Donald Trump would have handpicked to be around him. It would be a staff member in the White House. That call did not go through, so what Trump wanted to say wasn't heard, but it was concerning enough to the person that they passed it to their lawyer, and their lawyer told the committee. And part of the other reason why this is so concerning is the circumstances in which this call was placed. This was placed to someone who was not regularly in touch with Donald Trump, so wouldn't be expecting regular calls from the ex-president. And this call came after the Cassidy Hutchinson testimony that was so damaging to a person that could have corroborated what Cassidy Hutchinson was saying under oath. So the committee is looking for patterns, and clearly this was something concerning enough that they wanted to alert the Justice Department to it.
Elie, is telling the Justice Department, hey, we're putting this in your hands, is this about getting Trump to stop doing this, to not contact another witness, or is this about saying to the Justice Department, you got to do something about this, or both?
I think it's both, Brianna. First of all, you absolutely want to send a deterrent message here if you're the committee. You want to let the world know, let anyone who might be inclined to tamper with witnesses know we're taking this seriously and we're sending it up the street to DOJ. That can be scary. It should be scary because witness tampering is a very serious crime. But there also is follow-up investigation that DOJ ought to do here. On its own, in isolation, a phone call that was not answered and not returned, that's not enough to prosecute anyone for. But there's important follow-up questions that I would have for this staffer. Have you ever spoken with Donald Trump? Has he ever reached out since he left office? I know we're reporting is that infrequent, but have you ever? Has anyone else reached out to you? A lot of times when people try to intimidate witnesses or tamper with witnesses, they do it through an intermediary. They send some other person to send a message first. And as Katelyn noted, the timing here is conspicuous. This happened just after Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony, just as we're on the brink of next week's hearing, which will address what was happening inside the White House on January 6th. Does this staffer know anything about that? So I think that it goes both ways here, Brianna.
And John, I think it is important to note that one of the things that one would look at in an investigation is a pattern of behavior by someone over time. Maggie Haberman reminded us, I think, that Donald Trump tried to reach out to Michael Cohen back when they were on okay terms after Cohen's home and office were first raided by the FBI.
That's right. And it's Michael Cohen, the ex-president's former consigliere, who said that Trump operates a bit like a mob boss. It's all direction, it's indication, it's through intermediaries. And we have seen a pattern from Donald Trump, in very public, for example, torching people who he perceives as turning on him, very publicly, like Cassie Hutchinson, trying to sort of, via messages, sort of destroy her reputation. And then praising people, in some cases convicted criminals, who he perceives as not having flipped on him. What's significant about this, as Ellie said, though, is that this is not someone who apparently has been in regular contact with the president. Getting a call from the ex-president at this time, in this context, that's unusual at the very least. And a brushback pitch in terms of saying witness intimidation is not acceptable, that's appropriate.
All right, Caitlin, John, Ellie, more on this. Thank you very much.
This morning, an Ohio man is being charged with the rape of a 10-year-old girl who needed to travel out of state to Indiana for an abortion. The case drew national attention. It also drew a lot of scrutiny in the wake of the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. CNN's Jean Casares is joining us now. Jean, this is sort of a twist because there were many people, namely Republicans, who had cast doubt on whether this even existed, whether this girl even existed, and yet here we are, charges now being filed.
It is a tragic, amazing story. Here are the facts. That man, according to police and court documents, is 27-year-old Garrison Fuentes. According to Franklin County Municipal Court, Fuentes is charged with felony rape of a minor under the age of 13 years old. He's being held on $2 million bond. He is charged with raping a 10-year-old girl who became pregnant. Now, police were alerted to the case because of a referral made to the Franklin County, Ohio Children's Services by her mother. Columbus Police Detective Jeffrey Hoon testified Wednesday at Fuentes' arraignment that the girl underwent a medical abortion in Indianapolis on June 30th. The procedure is banned in Ohio after 6 weeks of pregnancy. An OBGYN in Indianapolis told CNN that she did help a 10-year-old girl from Ohio who was 6 weeks and 3 days pregnant have the procedure.
Thank you for laying out the facts of this case as we know them, Jean. As Brianna mentioned, there were some who were raising questions about whether this even happened. What are these people who are raising that out saying now the charges have been filed?
You know, I looked on social media and many people just found this unbelievable. And I think it's a lesson for all of us. You know, a number of conservatives threw doubt on the story, and Jim Jordan actually called it a lie. He deleted that tweet. There's also an aspect that that the Attorney General of Ohio, Dave Yost, told Fox News early on Monday. So early on, we're on Thursday now, but he said that there was not a whisper that the crime had occurred, going so far as to claim that there had been no request for any DNA analysis on a rape kit matching such a case. Now, there's always two sides to a story. Is there another side? CNN is looking into it. Again, the mother of the girl reported the rape last month to Franklin County Children's Services Agency, which referred a complaint to police. And we also now know from testimony in that arraignment that DNA has been collected. It's being tested to make a confirmation. You got to do that for a criminal case, right? And Yost released the following statement on Wednesday, but did not offer an apology for casting doubt over the case. He wrote, quote, "My heart aches for the pain suffered by this young child. I am grateful for the diligent work of the Columbus Police Department in securing a confession and getting a rapist off the street." The doctor who spoke out about helping a girl with an abortion is also under fire. Indiana's Republican Attorney General went on Fox last night and claimed that the doctor herself failed to report the rape in Indiana. He has also said he's looking at challenging her medical license because there is mandatory reporting when you are someone of that level right there. So that is a story that is developing now.
Jean, thank you so much for that. We do appreciate it. I want to go live now to Wolf Blitzer, who is in Jerusalem for a special event underway. Wolf?
Very important day here in Jerusalem, Brianna. I'm Wolf Blitzer. We're reporting live from Jerusalem. We're awaiting a joint news conference from President Joe Biden and the Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid. The two are signing a new joint declaration in the meantime, aimed at expanding the security relationship between the two nations while countering efforts by Iran to destabilize the region. And this event comes as President Biden faces crises not only abroad, but also back in the United States, as we all know. Inflation levels surging to 40-year highs. Members of his own party have questioned his strategy and his leadership, and his approval numbers hitting new lows. Let's bring in our chief White House correspondent, Caitlin Collins. She's standing by She's live at the news conference here in Jerusalem. Set the scene for us, Caitlin.
Yeah, Wolf, we both watched that warm welcome yesterday as President Biden arrived here in Israel. Today is much more about business and time to get down to brass tacks as he is having these meetings with world leaders, including one that he just finished with the Israeli prime minister that went on for quite some time. They joked that they talked about American baseball, but really, Wolf, the issues on the agenda are much more serious. And it has to do with, of course, what is happening here in Israel with the Israeli-Palestine conflict, but also what is happening with Iran and countering Iran. That is a shared goal that they both have to limit their nuclear program, but they have two different ideas on how to do that. They disagree on the strategy, as you know, Wolf, because the United States has been trying to coax Iran back to the table for that nuclear agreement that former President Trump walked away from. Israel does not really see much value in a new agreement because they don't think it would do enough to restrict Iran's behavior. All of these are issues that they have been discussing, in addition to, of course, the fallout from the war in Ukraine that has continued to go on, with some U.S. officials previously critical of Israel for not doing enough to be forceful enough, vocal enough about condemning Russia's actions there. But yes, there will be a lot of questions here for President Biden, not just on the news at home when it came to those numbers on inflation that you saw, which the White House and President Biden himself have been pushing back on, saying they're unacceptable, but arguing that they believe they're out of date. But also, Wolf, about the trip that's coming up, which is to Saudi Arabia, where President Biden heads tomorrow after he finishes his meetings with world leaders here. And it's that sit down with the Saudi crown prince that is going to be first and foremost. Really, that's something that U.S. officials are bracing for, to see what that is actually going to look like. Because, of course, given what President Biden said on the campaign trail, it is almost guaranteed to be at least a bit awkward. Wolf.
Lots at stake right now and lots going on. We're going to take a quick break. The news conference here in Jerusalem, the President of the United States, the Prime Minister of Israel, that is next. Stand by. We'll be right back.
It's totally covered in solar, also the side panels, and we have this patented proprietary solar technology which we developed over the last couple of years. And this vehicle here is recharging on average per day 10 miles. In a week, it's 70 miles through the sun. Additionally, of course, I have a battery on board. I can recharge it just as a regular electric vehicle, but we have this convenient feature. It's taking away this fear of recharging, this fear of range anxiety, and making it more convenient, energy efficient, and you're saving costs. Energy is coming from the sun for free. And the second pillar is selling and licensing this technology to B2B customers. Trucks, train, buses, camper van. There's huge potential in this market to make the whole logistic industry more greener.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
These troops, they are Russian. I've spoken to the commander. He said they are now in control. It's a secret location. They're going to fire on Russian forces.
You downplayed the US intelligence assessments. Do you now regret that?
It is at least a chance to save their own lives. Matthew Chance, CNN.
Welcome back. I'm Wolf Blitzer in Jerusalem. This news conference between the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Israel is about to begin. They will both be making opening statements, then answering reporters' questions. David Sanger of the New York Times, our CNN political and national security analyst, is with me. In this joint declaration that they just approved, the U.S. and Israel, among other things, they said the United States stresses that integral to this pledge is the commitment never to allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. And then it goes on to say, and the U.S. is prepared to use all elements of its national power to ensure that outcome. That's a pretty stark warning to the Iranians.
It's strong wording. It's been used before. It also is designed, Wolf, to sort of elude the central question that has been the difference between the Israelis and the Americans, which is, would you allow Iran to get a threshold capability, go right up to the edge, but not quite build a weapon? And that's where the Israeli position has been, we can't let that happen, and the U.S. has been vaguer. So I would look at the press conference to see if the president goes off of this wording. And also, of course, look for what he says about Saudi Arabia and how he's going to deal with Mohammed bin Salman on his next stop tomorrow.
So you think they're going to get into that as well in the course?
I am quite certain he'll get asked about it. This is the one opportunity reporters have on the entire trip to ask questions of the president. I don't think they'll let him get very far without hearing about Saudi.
And you think the president will only answer that in terms of a question? He won't, as part of his opening statement, say anything along those lines?
You know, I think the hard part for the president right now is he wants to tell his base that human rights are central to his foreign policy. They have been central, but this has been the great glaring exception because he needs to convince Americans he's bringing down gas prices, and that means he's getting more oil flowing. And the Saudis know they have him where they want him, which is that finally the United States needs Saudi Arabia for something big. And this may be Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince's way out of the exile, diplomatic exile he has been in since the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, the dissident.
Yeah, who used to write for the Washington Post. And the U.S. intelligence community has effectively accused the Saudis of being involved in planning that murder.
They've gone beyond that. They have said that the crown prince himself was knowing of the plot. And many of them believe he helped organize it or in some way sent the people who ultimately did it, whether they intended to kill Khashoggi or not. So that puts the crown prince at the center of all of this. And that's one of the reasons that the president called Saudi Arabia a pariah state during the campaign. So this has been the one area where Joe Biden's really had to walk back the furthest.
In addition to trying to get the Saudis to increase oil production and other OPEC states as well, he also wants the Saudis to do what the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain and Morocco have done as part of the so-called Abraham Accords and establish full diplomatic relations with Israel. Is he going to get that from the Saudis?
You won't see that on this trip, I suspect, but you will see steps in that direction. And this integrated air defense, which you probably will hear about during the press conference, is a step in that direction, working with the Arab states against a common adversary, Iran, to ward off their air attacks and their drones.
All right, stand by for a moment, David. We're going to get back to you. We're waiting for the news conference to begin. We're told it will begin momentarily. In the meantime, I want to bring in Joseph Westfall, the former United States ambassador to Saudi Arabia. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us. You think there's going to be any breakthrough right now on either front as far as the U.S. and Saudi Arabia is concerned? Saudi Arabia agreeing to do what the U.S. would like to see, develop more oil right now to reduce the cost of gasoline in the United States and to fully establish diplomatic relations with Israel?
I think the president will make those cases in private, and there'll be an effort to do that. However, the Saudis don't have a lot of room to expand their production given the limited supply levels that they can go to. But the more important piece, and you mentioned it, Wolf, earlier, David mentioned it, is the fact that OPEC is an important player here, and Saudi, of course, is a critical player in OPEC. This is a long-range strategy for the president to get them to help with OPEC decisions about supply in the future and what role Russia plays with OPEC as one of the plus countries.
How significant is it, Ambassador, that the Saudis apparently have agreed, and it's symbolic, but I think it's pretty significant, to allow Israeli planes to fly over Saudi airspace? For example, if flights are going from Israel to India or to the Far East, they can now fly over Saudi Arabia airspace. A few years ago, when you were ambassador, that would have been unheard of, right?
Right, exactly. No, I think a future diplomatic relationship between Saudi Arabia and Israel is coming. The Saudis really, really want to have, I believe, an important relationship with Israel. Israel is a technological giant. They're a very developed, sophisticated country. They can be a real great partner to Saudi Arabia, and they have, of course, the common enemy of Iran. So I think that the meeting the president's having with the Gulf nations leaders, along with the leader of Egypt, Jordan, and Iraq, is really important in setting a tone for how they're going to address Iran's activities in the region, whether it's in Yemen, in Syria, in Lebanon, etc. So I think this is a really important step.
And as you correctly point out, Ambassador, as you correctly point out, one thing that's sort of unifying the Israelis and some of these other Arab countries like the UAE and Bahrain and maybe even Saudi Arabia is the concern over Iran and its program to try to develop some sort of nuclear weapon. They are just as concerned as the Israelis are on this potential threat down the road. Stand by, Ambassador. We're going to get back to you, to David Sanger. Caitlin Collins is at the news conference. We're expecting the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Israel to answer reporters' questions momentarily, and the President presumably will answer some questions on the U.S. economy right now as well. We'll have special coverage right after this.
Inside Africa Fact File, in association with Zenith Bank.
I am Nigerian by blood, British by birth, and American by residence. It is important to me that those same strands of inclusivity that flow through me are mirrored in the stories that we tell. One World is a place where Africa has an equal seat at the global table alongside Europe, the Americas, and Asia. Every continent has a voice, and where everyone watching has a stake in the global conversation.
One World with Zain Asher, tonight on CNN.
No holds barred.
Out front tonight, hypocrite in chief.
No nonsense.
How stupid do you think we are?
Because getting to the truth matters. Aaron Burnett out front, Tuesday to Saturday on CNN. Coronavirus. To get daily news updates in your inbox, sign up for the CNN newsletter. Coronavirus. Fact versus fiction.
Transformation. Technology. New Marketplace Europe.
All aboard for the Great European Getaway. The summer tourist season is turning red hot.
Marketplace Europe. Saturday on CNN.
I'm Wolf Blitzer in Jerusalem. We're standing by for President Biden's joint news conference here in Jerusalem with the Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid. They're going to be taking questions from American and Israeli journalists. Bianna Golodryga is joining us right now, our CNN Global Affairs analyst. Bianna, I assume the President of the United States will be asked by some of these White House correspondents who are traveling with him about the economic issues he's facing at home, in addition to the foreign policy and national security issues he's facing here abroad. What do you expect?
Yeah, he dealt with that even yesterday. The administration obviously having to respond to that very disappointing 9.1% inflation report for last month. The administration obviously saying that this is unacceptable. The report has indicated that there has been a continued rise in oil prices. Obviously, the administration putting their blame on this war in Ukraine and Russia for the rise in oil prices globally. They'll also likely say that this is a backward-looking indicator and that going forward, they're hoping that at least inflation has peaked out. We have seen gas prices declining over the past few weeks. Of course, that's little consolation for Americans at home as they continue to pay more prices both at the gas station and at the grocery store. And it's really having an impact on his overall polling numbers, something that's been a big priority for not only this administration, but for his party as a whole as we head to the midterms in just a few months. I think it's going to be little consolation to see whatever comes out of this meeting with the Saudis in terms of any attempt that they may provide as far as relief to release more oil. That is likely to happen, but that's something that Americans and the rest of the world won't feel for the next few weeks or months. So this is some sort of instant gratification that the president can deliver to Americans in terms of this trip and the urgency of it. Obviously, a lot of pressure on this president, both from Republicans and Democrats, as to why he would be going to the Saudis at this point, given his past statements on their human rights abuses. And it's going to be a very tough meeting for the president to have to face MBS tomorrow. Whether there will be a handshake, a fist bump, who knows? But it's a complete turnaround from how he described that kingdom during just the past couple of years, and obviously during his election.
Yeah, during the campaign, he called the Saudis a pariah nation. Let's see how that unfolds when he arrives in Saudi Arabia. He's going to be heading there, and the talks will be taking place on Friday. We'll have, of course, extensive coverage of all of that. We're standing by for this joint news conference between the President of the United States, the Prime Minister of Israel, to begin momentarily. They'll be taking questions from reporters. You see some of the officials walking in right now. I think that's Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, sitting down. We'll have live coverage. That's coming up in just a moment. Let's take a very, very quick break. We'll be right back.
I'm Mindy Kincaid in Atlanta, and this is CNN.
We're here at the home of one of the FSB team. Was it your team that poisoned Navalny?
What do you want the world to know?
People are so exhausted. Just going to help her carry this bag.
Scores of Taliban fighters, and just behind us, the U.S. Embassy.
I'm the one who has to look them in the eye. Can I have your word? These people are depending on you.
Now they're pressing in. They want desperately to tell their stories.
My name is Stephen Jameson, Global Head of Circular Economy Solutions at SAP. The aim of a circular economy is to eliminate waste, circulate materials, keep products in use as long as possible, and regenerate natural systems. We're talking about a fundamental reworking of how we deliver the economy. At the moment, we're based upon an extractive system which depends upon nature, but is ultimately extractive. That will only go one way in the long term. A regenerative economy ultimately creates abundance of opportunity, abundance of materials, abundance of resources that enable us to thrive as a species and thrive as a piece of nature and as a part of nature.
Our mission here at CNN and journalists. The news comes first. That's when your heart beats a little bit faster. More breaking news that we are following right now. President Biden's joint news conference with the Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid is about to begin. We see both of them right now. They're sitting down. They're going to be signing this agreement, this joint strategic partnership, joint declaration, as it's called. Let's listen in. Let's see if they say anything as they sign this important strategic partnership joint declaration, once again, as it's called. Hadass Gold, our Jerusalem correspondent, is watching all of this unfold. Hadass, I've gone through this document. I know you have as well, and there are several important elements included in this joint declaration.
Well, first off, just the name of it, the Jerusalem Declaration. For the United States, it was so important that former President Donald Trump recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And it's important to them that President Biden has not rolled that back, has not moved the embassy that was moved to Jerusalem, has not moved it back to Tel Aviv. So even the name of this declaration, calling it the Jerusalem Declaration, will likely be seen as a win for Israel. Now, important for Israel in this is that there is an American commitment to Israel's defense, to its qualitative military edge, as well as a commitment to never allow Iran to obtain a nuclear
Hadass,
weapon.
I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to interrupt you, Hadass, because they're about to have their opening statements beginning, I think, with the Prime Minister of Israel.
The King's famous march from Selma to Montgomery. Walking beside him in the front row was a Jewish rabbi, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. When he returned home that day, Rabbi Heschel wrote in his diary, "Today I felt my legs were praying." In the state of Israel, Mr. President, our legs pray every single day. Nothing is in our lives is taken for granted. My father was a Jewish child in the Budapest ghetto, hiding from those who tried to kill him. The fact that I am standing here today did not happen by itself. We learned the lesson, Mr. President, at all times. Israel must be strong, free, and safe, with a powerful army that can defend our citizens. Be it Joshua crossing the Jordan River or Dr. King crossing the Alabama River, the principle is the same. If you want your independence, your hands must defend you and your legs must pray for you. You must march fearlessly towards the river. This past year, with Russia's unjustified invasion of Ukraine, with the Iranian nuclear threat becoming more dangerous, and with the threats of terrorism worldwide, we were all reminded of something. In order to protect freedom, sometimes force must be used. Nobody wants that, but neither can we shy away from it. On the side of terror stand people who will not hesitate to exploit any weakness, people who do not play by the rules. Those of us who are fortunate enough to be born free people sometimes do not understand the intensity of the hatred behind the attack on democracy. What did we do to them? What makes them crash planes into skyscrapers in New York and fire rockets at kindergartens in the city of Sderot? The answer is fear. What scares them the most is that their citizens, their people, can see us, can see our quality of life, the dynamism and creativity of our economy, the rights of women and the LGBTQ community, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. Our way of life is what threatens them. It's what makes the Iranian regime develop its nuclear program. Hezbollah aim its missiles at us, and terrorist organizations worldwide send suicide bombers. They want to destroy the only Jewish state in the world. We will never let that happen. Words will not stop them, Mr. President. Diplomacy will not stop them. The only thing that will stop Iran is knowing that if they continue to develop their nuclear program, the free world will use force. The only way to stop them is to put a credible military threat on the table. You have said many times, Mr. President, that big countries do not bluff. I completely agree. It should not be a bluff, but the real thing. The Iranian regime must know that if they continue to deceive the world, they will pay a heavy price. Here in the Middle East, we have an alternative now. It is growing and gaining power. We are creating an alliance of moderate countries that believe in peace, that believe that our children deserve the opportunity to live a better life. From here, from Jerusalem, the eternal capital of the State of Israel, you will travel to Saudi Arabia. Your visit to Saudi Arabia is important for Israel and for the entire region, for our security and for the future and prosperity of the Middle East. We send with you to all the nations of the region, including, of course, the Palestinians, a message of peace. Israel wants peace and believes in peace. We will never yield an inch of our security. We are obligated to be cautious at every step, but to any country, any nation that wants peace and normalization with us, we say, Ahlan wa sahlan, shalom, welcome. Mr. President, you will meet with the leaders of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, Oman, and Iraq. I would like you to pass them all a message from us. Our hand is outstretched for peace. We are ready to share our technology and experience, ready for our people to meet and learn about one another, ready for our scientists to collaborate and our businesses to cooperate. The book of Psalms says all of this in one verse. Chapter 29 reads, Hashem oz la'amo yiten, Hashem yevarech et amo b'shalom. The Lord will give strength to his people. The Lord will bless his people with peace. If we are strong, if we are determined, if the world understands that we will not hesitate to defend ourselves and our values, peace can come. Mr. President, our relationship runs deep. It crosses party lines. It connects not only our governments, but also our peoples. This friendship is one of the cornerstones of Israel's national security. It is moving, and it is certainly not taken for granted. Throughout all your years in public service, you were one of the chief architects of this relationship. For that, you have the everlasting gratitude of the people of Zion. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. eloquent statement. I'm honored to be back here in the capital of Israel. As I said yesterday, I've met with every prime minister since Golda Meir. It was a pleasure to be able to spend some time with you today and to get to know you better. Mr. Prime Minister, a deep love and respect for Israel has only taken a deeper hold of my heart and my gut since I first visited here back in 1973 as a young senator. I'm returning for my 10th visit as president, this time as President of the United States. But I've never forgotten what Prime Minister Meir told me when I was a brand new junior senator from the state of Delaware. It was just weeks before the Yom Kippur War, and she could see on my face that I was worried. As we stood before the press, taking questions and pictures, she looked at me, and without press hearing, she said, "Don't look so worried, Senator. Israel has a secret weapon." I looked at her as I turned my head, and she was going to tell me. I just looked at her. She said, "We have nowhere else to go." I'll never forget what she told me. That was nearly 50 years ago. 50 years ago, the threats then were real, and the threats to Israel remain real today. The scourge of anti-Semitism still marches around the world. We must never forget the horrors which an unchecked hatred can lead. And that's why I immediately, when I returned, I wanted to visit Yad Vashem. When I landed yesterday to bear witness, to remember, to renew our vow of never, never again. At the same time, the Israel of today is not the Israel of 50 years ago. You've cultivated new resources, capabilities, new relationships, including a growing integration with neighbors in the region. You have new tools that keep Israel strong and secure. You have an ironclad commitment from the United States of America to Israel's security, an ironclad commitment. We'll make sure that Israel can defend itself by itself. When I was vice president under President Obama, we passed a record-setting agreement for Israel's security, $38 billion over a 10-year period. And I was proud that last year we also provided an additional $1 billion to replenish Israel's Iron Dome supplies, making 2022 the largest single year of military assistance that Israel has ever received. Yesterday, I viewed some of Israel's Iron Dome technology, as well as a very promising new Iron Beam technology, a laser-enabled missile defense system. These technologies and advancements are critical. They're critical because every rocket that is intercepted is a potential life, perhaps more, that has been saved. And as we move forward together, partners in both security and in innovation, the United States and Israel defense sectors will cooperate in new high-energy laser weapon systems that can defend Israeli lives, as well as lives of American service members. Israel and the United States also stand together to defend fundamental values and underwrite global security, prosperity, and freedom, not just for us, but for many around the world. And Putin's assault on Ukraine is a challenge to the peace and stability everywhere in the world. Putin's war must be a strategic failure, and the free world must sustain our resolve to help Ukraine defend its democracy. The United States will continue to support Ukraine and the Ukrainian people who have been devastated and displaced by the Russian violence. Today, you and I also discussed America's commitment to ensuring Iran never obtains a nuclear weapon. This is a vital security interest to both Israel and the United States, and I would add, for the rest of the world as well. I continue to believe that diplomacy is the best way to achieve this outcome, and will continue to work with Israel to counter other threats from Iran throughout the region, including support for terrorism, ballistic missile program that continues, and the proliferation of weapons to terrorists and proxies like Hezbollah. We'll also continue building on the Abraham Accords, which I strongly support, because they deepen Israel's integration into the broader region and establish lasting ties for business, cooperation, and tourism. We've just completed the first Leaders Summit among Israel, India, the United States, and the United Arab Emirates to deepen the economic ties between the Middle East and the Indo-Pacific, to create new partnerships, to tackle global challenges like food insecurity and clean energy technology. Regional integration is also the goal of the historic Negev Forum, which took place here in Israel this past March. Israel's integration in the region, Israel's peace with its neighbors, these are essential goals. Tomorrow, I'll be the first American president to fly from Israel directly to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. That represents important progress. And when I see the Saudi leadership tomorrow, I'll be carrying a direct message of peace and extraordinary opportunities that a more stable and integrated region could bring to the region and, quite frankly, the whole world. As we work together toward greater integration, we'll also continue to work toward a lasting negotiated peace between the State of Israel and the Palestinian people. Israel must remain an independent, democratic Jewish state, the ultimate guarantee and guarantor of security of the Jewish people, not only in Israel, but the entire world. I believe that to my core. And the best way to achieve that remains a two-state solution for two people, both of them who have deep and ancient roots in this land, living side by side in peace and security. Both states fully respecting the equal rights of their citizens, both people enjoying equal measures of freedom. And any more that takes us further from that outcome, I believe anything is detrimental to the long-term security of Israel. Prime Minister Lapid, Israel and the United States are natural partners because we share the same values. Our people share the same innovative spirit, the same determination to preserve and persevere through every single challenge. That's why we're launching a new high-level strategic dialogue on technology that's going to help Israel and the United States harness critical and emerging technologies and apply them to issues that matter most to our mutual futures. So thank you, Mr. President, for welcoming me back, for fostering the enduring bonds and continuing them that link the people of Israel and the United States. That's what this visit is about, affirming those ties that stretch back to just 11 minutes after Israel declared statehood, when the United States became the first country in the world to recognize Israel. And I assure you, it will be the last country in the world ever to walk away from Israel. Ties that have grown deeper and broader with each passing year and now encompass a 21st century partnership, one grounded on ageless values and looking squarely at the future. We're here to stay, Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister. Like it or not, we're with you. There's no way out. I want to thank you very, very much for your hospitality. And I mean from the bottom of my heart that your security, the security is going to determine the security of Jewish people around the world for the rest of the world. It's critical. And we're in it with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And before we move on to the question, there is a technical change on the stage.
These guys work awful hard.
Yes, we're just standing here.
Thank you very much. We will now be taking questions from the press. The first one to ask a question is Ms. Gilly Cohen from Channel 11, Israeli television.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to ask, will you set a deadline for the nuclear talks or define a certain stage when you will say there is no more opportunity to revive the nuclear deal, and what will happen afterwards? And another question, sir. Your visit tomorrow is Jerusalem, and you won't be accompanied by an Israeli official. Does this represent a change in your administration's view regarding the recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and if East Jerusalem is part of it? Thank you.
Answer to your last question is no. With regard to your first question, we've laid out for the people, for the leadership of Iran, what we're willing to accept in order to get back in the JCPOA. We're waiting for the response. When that will come, I'm not certain, but we are not going to wait forever.
Mr. President?
No, the question was for the President. And
Mr. President, do you want to call on the next question?
Sure. I was given a list here. Steve Holland of Reuters.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. There is some opposition back home to your meeting with Saudi leaders this week. What will you say to Saudi leaders, specifically to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, about the Khashoggi murder and other human rights practices? And if I may, Prime Minister Lapid, how close are you to an agreement with Saudi Arabia to gain overflight rights, and should we expect that soon? Thank you.
With regard to the question you asked me, my views on Khashoggi have been absolutely, positively clear. And I have never been quiet about talking about human rights. The question that the reason I'm going to Saudi Arabia, though, is much broader, is to promote U.S. interest. Promote U.S. interest in a way that I think we have an opportunity to reassert what I think we've made a mistake of walking away from, our influence in the Middle East. I'm going to be meeting with 9 other heads of state. It's not just it happens to be in Saudi Arabia. And so there are so many issues at stake that I want to make clear that we can continue to lead in the region and not create a vacuum that is filled by China and or Russia against the interest of both Israel and the United States and many other countries. And so the purpose of the visit is to coordinate with 9 heads of state what are in U.S. interest, and I believe in Israel's interest as well.
Let's the Prime Minister.
I always bring up human rights. I always bring up human rights. But my position on Khashoggi has been so clear. If anyone doesn't understand it in Saudi Arabia or anywhere else, then they haven't been around for a while.
Well, about the overflights of Saudi Arabia, of course, as I was saying in my speech, we are all for promoting normalizations with every country in the region that it is possible. But since the president is going to Saudi Arabia and there will be a finalization of the issues over there, I will let the president finalize this when he's in Jeddah.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
I'm optimistic.
And the next question will come from Ms. Tal Schneider from Times of Israel.
Hi.